Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is an NPR article very relevant to today, very relevant to President Trump getting the Supreme Court to overturn a very unconstitutional guilty verdict. A unanimous Supreme Court restores Trump to the Colorado ballot. NPR. This was months back. But this was a state decision. People say, well, a state decision, it's going to be difficult for the Supreme Court to overturn a state ruling. Well, this was the Colorado State Supreme Court that was overturned by the United States Supreme Court. It was unanimous. It was unanimous. Even the liberal justices sided with Trump. Do you want to know why, ladies and gentlemen? Hit subscribe to this channel. We will get to that. We will get to the immunity decision, and what can I tell you other than this is a very important story that I'm going to continue to talk about. Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi will be confirmed. This is a certainty. And before we get to Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi and the immunity decision that the Supreme Court gave President Trump, number one, hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you. A state cannot level a federal charge at Trump without the federal government involved. That's number one. Number two, he did not commit an FEC crime. The FEC and the DOJ dropped the case. Number three, he could have very easily paid Stormy with dollar bills. It wouldn't have mattered. Okay. Number four, the immunity decision, in addition to the issue of federalism, a state cannot level a federal crime without the DOJ and FEC involved. They dropped the hush money case. It's blatantly, patently unconstitutional. In addition to the issue of federalism, in addition to the issue of the FEC dropping the case, there was no crime. The immunity victory completely erases the testimony from Hope Hicks. That is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. Hit subscribe. Let's get started. Paul Bartlett to my super chat. Thank you. Paul, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you so very, very, very much. Let's listen to President Trump. We'll start this off.
Would your client like to be heard?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This has been a very terrible experience. I think it's been a tremendous setback for New York and the New York court system. This is a case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring. He thought it was, from what I read and from what I hear, inappropriately handled before he got there. A gentleman from a law firm came in and acted as a district attorney, and that gentleman, from what I heard, was a criminal or almost criminal in what he did. It was very inappropriate. It was somebody involved with my political opponent. Part of the records that we're talking about, they're saying, I just noticed where he said I was falsifying business records. Well, the falsification of business records, as they said, was calling a legal expense in the books where everybody could see them, a legal expense. In other words, that legal fees or legal expense were put down as legal expense by accountants. They weren't put down by me. They were put down by accountants. I didn't call them construction, concrete work. I didn't call them electrical work. I didn't call them anything. They called a legal fee or a legal expense. And for this, I got indicted. It's incredible, actually. Now, if you look, my attorney alluded to it, the top legal scholars and legal pundits in this country, the ones that are quoted all the time on television, that are making their views felt, and highly respected people, have said, everyone, virtually everyone that I know of, I haven't seen any to the contrary, not one. And these people are not exactly friends of mine, to put it mildly. But they all said this is a case that should have never been brought. It's an injustice of justice. Very respected Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, Judge David Rifkin, a wonderful man who just passed away, by the way, Greg Jarrett, Ellie Honig from CNN, of all places. CNN said that, Paul Ingratian, Alan Dershowitz, They all said this is not a case that should be brought. It's not, think about it, legal expenses are down as legal expenses, and I get indicted for business records. Everybody should be so accurate. It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history, and won, as you know, all 7 swing states, won conclusively all 7 swing states, and won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. And they've been watching your trial, so they understood it. I wasn't allowed to use the lawyer-client privilege or the reliance on counsel. I had a lawyer that made this deal, and he admitted that. And he was also a totally discredited person. We weren't allowed to use the information from the Southern District that totally discredited him. It wasn't allowed to be put in. And that was terrible, unbelievable. And this is a man who's got no standing. He's been disbarred on other matters, unrelated. And he was allowed to talk as though he were George Washington. But he's not George Washington. He shouldn't have been allowed. The Southern District did a book of approximately 28 pages where I've never seen anything like it. They excoriated him. You wouldn't let it be put into evidence. So he was able to testify as a witness, and I think it's a disgrace to the system. I was under a gag order. I'm the first president in history that was under a gag order where I couldn't talk about aspects of the case that are very important. I guess I'm still under, so probably I won't do it now. I assume I'm still under a gag order. But the fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. They talk about business records, and the business records were extremely accurately counted. I had nothing to do with them. That was done by an accountant or a bookkeeper who I think gave very credible testimony and was corroborated by everybody that was asked. And with all that's happening in our country today, with the city that's burning to the ground, one of our largest, most important cities burning to the ground, with wars that are uncontrollably going on, with all of the problems of inflation and attacks on countries and all of the horrible things that are going on, I got indicted over calling a legal expense a legal expense. It was called a legal expense. I just want to say I think it's an embarrassment to New York, and New York has a lot of problems, but this is a great embarrassment. I believe that this and other cases that were brought, as you know, the DOJ is very much involved in this case. That's because that's the political opponent they're talking about. The DOJ is very involved. You have a gentleman sitting right there from the DOJ who was from the DOJ's office. He was also involved with the New York State Attorney General's case. And he went from there to here. He went around and did what he had to do. He got them to move on me. But in the meantime, I won the election in a massive landslide. And the people of this country understand what's gone on. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before. And I'd just like to explain that I was treated very, very unfairly. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Well, everything Trump said was right. And you're going to hear from John Yoo right now, who basically says the immunity victory. He has presidential immunity. He cannot be indicted, prosecuted, or convicted for performing a speech. Okay, so number one, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is the most important, one of the most, obviously, with the tragedy going on right now in the West Coast and a whole bunch of confirmations. This is in my wheelhouse, you know. This is the topic that really gets me going, and I want to focus on this as much as I can until the next really important story that I feel, needs to be addressed. This is a constitutional nightmare. You cannot have state prosecutors leveling federal crimes at individuals throughout the country. Democrats, for example, you cannot have, even though I would never in a million years anymore vote Democrat, ever. Okay, I used to be a lifelong Democrat. About 7-8 years ago, said Trump was a great president. So, well, about 6 years ago, said Trump was a great president. What's the problem here? About 7 years ago, I said that. Great economy, record low poverty, record highs in household median income, hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs. The working class, quote unquote, the Democrats love, should absolutely adore Trump. Trump, fact, is the best thing that ever happened to the working class of this country. We had record low poverty, record highs in household median income. That's the New York Times, CNN. That's a fact. With low inflation, with low interest rates. So when inflation shot up to 9%, Democrats said, oh, we took care of inflation. No, you raised interest rates. Now, and mortgage rates doubled. Okay, now you have real estate markets in regions of the country that might not rebound for 10, 20 years. I mean, 10 years possibly, in places that have been devastated. I mean, this is just unbelievable. I mean, we can go on forever. But anyway, the point is, under our system of federalism, John Yoo is going to explain right now, you simply cannot have a state prosecutor leveling a federal crime at political opponents. It's not possible. This is not possible. And again, like people are talking about, the gag order, none of these things are constitutional. You cannot have a gag order on a sitting president. So I'm going to continue to focus on this topic because it's very, very important. It's one of the most important topics, not only in modern U.S. history, but in American history. A state cannot level a federal crime without the Department of Justice involved, number one. Trump is protected under presidential immunity. The Hope Hicks testimony must be erased. Number three, there was no FEC crime. Hans A. von Spakovsky, Bradley Smith, Trey Traynor. I thought we're supposed to trust all the wonderful, amazing experts. These are former FEC chairmen stating that Trump did not commit a crime. Okay, and then there's other issues too. He didn't commit a crime. He's protected under immunity, and a state cannot level a federal statute against anyone without the Department of Justice involved. And the fourth thing is that there was no federal statute cited. There was no federal statute cited. Okay, and we can go on forever. There's potential misconduct in the court, a whole bunch of things, possible coordination between Biden's administration and state and local prosecutors. I mean, we can go on forever. I mean, there's so many conflicts of interest in terms of donations. Democrats love donations. Not long ago, we heard a donation is a donation. If you even know what I'm talking about, I love you. If you know, if I, not long ago, one of the wonderful morally superiors said a donation is a donation. And if you're watching right now and you know what on earth I'm talking about, I want to let you know that I love you and God bless you. Anyway, let's continue.
Okay, that was ESPN host Stephen A. Smith going after New York Judge Juan Merchan and DA Alvin Bragg for their lawfare attack on President Trump in what legal pros call a biased, botched, and unconstitutional New York case over Trump's payment to Stormy Daniels. They say will likely get tossed out on appeal. Look who's back with us, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. John, great to see you again. What do you make of all this?
I think Judge Merchan's quest to get his white whale, Donald Trump, is what we're going to see tomorrow. He's revealing the real political nature of what he and District Attorney Alvin Bragg in New York City have been up to all along, because he's already said he's not going to sentence Trump to jail. But he still wants to sentence Trump with just 11 days before Trump becomes president. So there's no time for Trump to effectively appeal this case. At the same time, we all know that Merchan is going to either have to throw the case out or hold a new jury trial at some point, because the Supreme Court on July 1st said that this trial was flawed. And
the Supreme Court on July 1st stated...
So what Merchan's been doing, why I say it's...
The Supreme Court, that's a great picture of Trump. Yeah, Mr. President, that's the Supreme Court on July 1st stated that there was no case. Okay, this I'm trying to tell everybody. I might be working on an article soon. Probably not, maybe, potentially, who knows. I haven't written an article in a while. But you read my writing on hagoodman.com, but we'll see. But anyway, the Supreme Court already ruled that a president is immune from civil and criminal prosecution for official acts. An official act is speaking to for example, to Hope Hicks, could be speaking to Michael Cohen as president. You cannot use that to convict him of misdemeanors that are elevated to felonies in the most absurd attempt at trying to go after somebody. He won the popular vote in part because of this type of behavior by the morally superior, highly educated in New York.
Heal this case. At the same time, we all know that Merchan is going to either have to throw the case out or hold a new jury trial at some point, because the Supreme Court on July 1st said that this trial was flawed. And so what Merchan's been doing, why I say it's political, is because he's dragged his feet for 6 months when he could have done either of these other things so that he could ensure that Trump would be the first felon president in our history.
I mean, yeah, so he wants that asterisk against Trump's name. I mean, Trump asked the Supreme Court to intervene.
But words have meaning. And so you don't need to you don't have to have a doctorate in the philosophy of language to understand that he's not a felon. There's not one person in this country that truly believes. There is not one citizen, one individual in the United States of America that truly believes Donald Trump is a felon. Even the people who say he's a felon, even the people who, gleefully mock Trump or, denigrate Trump or whatever. Not one human being in this country or even in the world truly believes that Donald Trump is a felon. Because the word comes with a meaning. You've committed a bank robbery, God forbid. You have ended someone's life, God forbid. You have defrauded people of, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, like Bernie Madoff or Bankman-Fried with the crypto Ponzi scheme. Okay, it's not the word convicted felon is not defined as somebody who paid Stormy and committed an imaginary FEC violation. Nobody believes that Trump is a convicted felon. This is a Pyrrhic victory for a political party that loves Pyrrhic victories. It didn't even help them any. Had they not gone after Trump, had they simply treated Donald Trump like a normal president, had media and the Democratic Party simply accepted his win over Clinton in 2016, they would have had a much better chance. He would have won because he's a good president, but they would have had a much better chance in 24. I mean, you could look back and say, that's the only way they would have won 4 years ago. Maybe that is the only way. But then they ousted the most popular candidate of all time. We don't have to get into that after he won his primary. What they did to Bernie Sanders is nothing compared to what they did to Biden. What they did to Biden is 10 billion times worse than what they did to Bernie Sanders. Then they pontificate about democracy.
This is the books and records case that really is a misdemeanors case. It's like parking tickets that Alvin Bragg, the DA, ramped up into federal felonies because he cited campaign finance violations. The thing about that, John, he never proved that in any which way, shape, or form this changed anybody's vote.
Yes, actually, that's another reason, the one you just gave, why this whole trial was done in an unconstitutional manner. Put aside what the Supreme Court said in July, that President Trump has immunity, and that the exact kinds of evidence Merchan introduced were unconstitutionally introduced. The second point you just made, Merchan here and Bragg are trying to claim that Trump somehow stole the election, that he violated federal campaign laws. Well, that's up to the Justice Department and the FEC to prosecute. That's not up to any sort of two-bit prosecutor in New York City to try to relitigate the whole election out of 2016. The Justice Department looked into this. The FEC looked into this. They decided not to bring any cases. And so what Merchan and Bragg did is they tried to take, as you said, this accounting law and tried to turn it into a claim that Trump had somehow stolen the 2016 election. Well, the 2024 results, I think, give the lie to that.
So this is a real clear abuse of the justice system to go after a political rival. Final word.
Yes, and in fact, I think if Merchan goes ahead with this, and I think Trump would be entirely justified to think of ways to retaliate against New York City. For example, the Justice Department should investigate them for violating civil rights.
Okay. John Yoo, you're so smart. Thank you so much for breaking this down with us. It's good to have you back on. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Liz.
So you're going to have investigations. You're going to have indictments. You're going to have a whole lot of investigations and indictments. This is John Yoo earlier on talking about the case and how a state cannot level, like he just stated right now, he said that with Mark Levin, a state cannot level a federal crime. It's unconstitutional without the DOJ involved. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel.
Institution, visiting fellow, and all-around great guy. John Yoo, you see this case in Manhattan. How bad is it for our nation? How bad is it for our electoral system? How bad is it for the rule of law, for federalism, the whole kit and caboodle?
Mark, thanks for having me back. I am saddened at what this case has now done to our political and constitutional system. It's hard to exaggerate the harm that it's going to do, not just to Donald Trump. He's important, but the more important question is, what does this do to our institutions? As you said, our legal system, our electoral system, our system of federalism and the separation of powers for all future presidents, for all future citizens. First, we have never prosecuted a former president before. This was not because past presidents hadn't done anything bad. It's because we thought it was the best thing for our separation of powers to leave presidents alone. And the reason why is because the Constitution concentrates so much responsibility and authority in the president to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, to protect the country from foreign threats, that we don't want our presidents, when they're making the hardest decisions on behalf of the country, to be worrying about whether they're going to be prosecuted or not. We don't want our presidents to be insurance claims adjusters worrying about risks and balances of their own personal finances and their own personal legal situation. We want them to decide what's best for the country.
Do you think more Americans and more people around the world think that Trump broke the law, or that President Obama broke the law, or that Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld broke laws, utilizing quote-unquote intelligence to start never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts? Who broke laws? Trump or President Obama with a failed intervention in Libya? Who broke laws? Was it, or and other issues with President Obama as well, or Clinton with private servers, or Biden and Hunter with a laptop full of possible graft and bribery? Who broke laws? I want to know who broke laws. Nobody believes this nonsense. Nobody believes this. It's complete and utter nonsense. But these are Pyrrhic victories. These are victories that are simply for public relations that actually hurt the Democratic Party in the long run. But they can't, and you see what's taking place in the West Coast. Democrats are on a course, it's like that song, Highway to You Know Where, Highway to You Know Where. And so it's like that, they're on a highway to you know where. It's just, they can't get off it.
Now, because this case was so frivolous, because it was based on such concocted legal theories, it opens the door wide now for any DA, and there are 2,500 of them in the country, any DA to sue and prosecute any president, any past president, perhaps any sitting president under the theories that were put forward earlier. I think an even worse problem is for the rule of law. Because what we've all learned now, I think, is that prosecutors can destroy a person. They can destroy a person's reputation, his finances, just by investigating them. even before they get to court, just by publicly announcing that they're investigating someone. We have for 230 years relied on prosecutors, on our elected chief executives, governors, and presidents to show, again, statesmanship, to go show good judgment, not to abuse this power. But now what we've seen is that I think the Biden Justice Department and these blue city DAs are abusing this power, not to try to stop crime, but to target individuals because they don't like them, because they're unpopular, and then to find the crimes to fit the man. That is directly a direct assault on the rule of law. And that harms all of us in the country, all the citizens, not just Trump, not just presidents, but you and me and everyone else.
And what about the electoral system when you have one of these DAs deciding that they get to decide or try to decide the outcome of an election through the process, that they can make a ambiguous reference to federal law, seize jurisdiction from what is a complex layer of federal authorities and decision makers when it comes to federal election campaign law, let alone seize the authority from federal courts and the Supreme Court to make these decisions, regardless of what the New York courts say up and down the chain. I mean, whatever the New York courts say up and down the chain, that is not the final decision. If the federal Supreme Court decides to step in, that's the final decision for you, New York. So if I'm in California and I see that it worked in New York because we have this lumbering appellate process, but I can interfere with an election, by the time the appellate process catches up with me, so be it. They're going to time it the same way. So this can really become a cancer on the political campaign system of the highest federal official in the United States, and the election there too, no?
Mark, I appreciate what you said in your opening statement, because the Supreme Court has made clear, not just in one offside comment, in 3 very clear decisions, that only the federal government can enforce federal law. Only the Justice Department and the Federal Election Commission can prosecute and bring suit for violations of federal election law. They're the guardians of how federal election should run. And so what happened here is that the DA, approved by this judge, Judge Merchan, grabbed the authority away and basically decided to prosecute his own interpretation of federal law. That's not permissible under our separation of powers and federalism. And the Supreme Court will reverse if, as you say, Mark, they get a chance to hear this case.
So John Yoo is absolutely brilliant in explaining. He's a law professor, so he's brilliant in explaining this. This is such an egregious violation of civil rights. Trump has civil rights like everybody else, It's really unbelievable. This is Alina Habba, ladies and gentlemen.
Incoming counselor to President-elect Trump, Alina Habba. Alina, we love talking to you. It's wonderful to see you again. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. First, do you have any more details on the alleged misconduct by the juror in this case?
I do, as part of, obviously I'm part of the team, but those are not ones that I am willing to share at this point. What I can tell you is it's definitely egregious, despite the redactions, and without getting into detail, it is not a questionable thing. There was misconduct by the jurors, and it would have anything thrown out. Now, one thing we are learning, as you've delicately said, but I will say more directly, Judge Merchan's description of what happened and what falls under the Supreme Court's decision is so flawed and egregious and so ridiculous. He is completely disregarding the Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court that said that there is presidential immunity for official acts.
Which means the evidence in the trial has to be thrown out, which means it's a mistrial. Okay? But that's politically, they're like, we'll wait for the Supreme Court. It doesn't hurt the court at all for them to sentence Trump. I mean, it's nothing to them. We're the rule of law. We're about the rule of law. Doesn't hurt them. They can sentence Trump even though it's unconstitutional. What do they care? If the Colorado State Supreme Court banned Trump and wanted to do so in every state of the country, you think a state court in New York won't do the same thing? Of course they would. I don't care. Why would they care? They're like, let the Supreme Court take care of it. and the Supreme Court will, or a court before an appeals court. But it'll definitely, with 100% certainty, be overturned. Not only because of the immunity, which is what Alina Hobb was talking about, the system of federalism, which what John Yoo was talking about, but the fact that he didn't even commit a crime. Hanze von Spakovsky, Bradley Smith, Trey Traynor, all FEC chairmen stated Trump could have paid Stormy essentially with dollar bills. It would not have been an FEC crime because it would have taken place with or without running for president. That's what constitutes a crime. The Steele dossier was a crime. That's why the DNC and Clinton campaign paid FEC fines. Okay, that was a violation.
And now he is trying to carve out in any way he can to preserve face and say that this trial was not a complete hoax, was not a complete disaster, an evidentiary disaster. And now we know there were issues with the jury being tainted. So, this is where we are. And this is where we've been for 3.5 years. And frankly, why I think we won.
Alina, so we've got allegations of a juror's misconduct in the case. Can you please tell us how this case is ripe for appeal? Legal experts have told us there are a lot of constitutional violations. The jury wrongly heard evidence that was protected by presidential immunity the Supreme Court upheld, like President Trump's conversations with Hope Hicks. The judge delayed sentencing indefinitely. That's clearly a due process right to a speedy trial violation. And now juror misconduct, it sounds like that juror was tainted. There could have been bias here.
Yeah, let's add some to that. Statute of limitations, which before they brought this, we knew was passed. This case was passed up by Cy Vance. It was passed up prior by Bragg, and then it was brought again. How about we also discuss that the White House was coordinating and sent their own guy into work for the New York DA from the DOJ? How about that? How about selective prosecution, election interference, tying this man up in a hoax case during an election cycle when he should have been campaigning? How about all of the things you said? But this is where we have problems. The judge should have recused. We've said it time and time again. We have one thing standing right now before all the appeals we will take on this ridiculous decision today, and that is the motion to dismiss that this judge gave us leave to file. I don't have much hope in Judge Merchan, but we do have pending motions. Go ahead.
Sorry, Alina. So, Senator Chuck Grassley, has said this is really scary that all Americans, right or left, he's saying take the politics out of it. When you see the lawfare abuses, it could happen to you. It could happen to viewers. That's why millennial voters, we heard, were so scared about what the Justice Department and what cases like DA Bragg brought. They feel it could happen to them personally. This was a books and records misdemeanor, like a parking ticket, but it got ramped up into 34 felonies. That's terrifying for the American judicial system. Final word.
Yes, and he was not there. He was in the White House as president. These are acts that were done by an accounting team at the Trump Organization. And there is so many uncanny things happening here. And the American people are afraid, and they should be afraid, but not anymore. Because I can assure you that when we go in and when this administration gets to work, it will be top of mind to fix this lawfare and prosecution against a political opponent or any American. It should not happen.
The only way to fix it, the only way is for Trump to treat the wonderful people on the other side of the political divide in the same manner that they've treated him. That is the only way. That is the only way for him to fix this political quagmire that we have in our country. Okay, he won the popular vote. He has about a year and a half to 2 years, probably a year to a year and a half, to do everything he needs to do. Executive orders, energy policy, immigration, foreign policy, and special counsels or straight up indictments. They indicted him, and he won the popular vote. When he indicts them, they ain't going to win no popular vote, because they actually, very likely, almost certainly, engaged in a tremendous amount of corruption. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. This is a huge, huge story that I've been focusing on. We'll talk about this and more tomorrow. Thank you, Paul, by the way, always to my super chat. Thank you, Paul, and everybody who in the super chat.